Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, with leaders, with thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins, and today it's a real pleasure to be joined by Ryan Claytor. Ryan, you're very welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. I've been looking forward to our discussion today. So let's begin. Let's ask you to tell us a little bit about what you do, because you're involved in a couple of different creative areas. So over to you.
Well, thank you, Simon, so much for having me here. First of all, I really appreciate you chatting with me today. And yeah, the couple different creative areas I'm a part of are one, I'm a university professor, and two, I'm a comic book artist. But those two vocations work in tandem with one another because I teach comics at a Big Ten university in the United States at Michigan State University, and where we have the largest public collection of comic books in the entire world. So it's a pretty great place to be teaching comics. I feel really lucky to do that. But I'm here today because I've got a milestone book coming out. I have been making comics and illustrations and doing design for 20 years at this point, and I'm coming out with a big, oversized art book all about comics illustration and design, but this art book is not just a bunch of pretty pictures. I've read through a bunch of art books being an artist, and I've encountered books like that. And while it's really interesting to see the images, when it's just that, I'm left with feeling a little bit empty from that experience because I have so many questions about them. Like, when was this produced? Why was it produced? Who was it produced for? And I want to not only answer some of those questions with a really brief didactic text that accompanies each piece, but also a healthy amount of behind the scenes process photos that show how the piece came to be. So that's my book that's coming up, and I'm really excited about the content for it because it's been, you know, 20 years in the making. But I'm also really excited because of the formatting of the book. So I've been making work for 20 years now, and this is the most complex print and production project I've ever designed in my entire life. It's got things like dual cloth bound covers, dual foil stamped images on the front, spine, and back, built-in ribbon bookmark, copper gilded page edges, and we haven't even started talking about the interiors yet, where we've got things like gatefold pages, vellum overlays, die cut reveals, and more. So I know that's a lot of printer jargon that probably doesn't mean much to most people, but just for an example, do you mind if I share my screen for the video folks and I'll try to describe what we're looking at for the podcast folks?
Yeah, let's do that, Ryan. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we are sharing the screen to take a look at my currently running Kickstarter campaign for this book, which is at onebiteatatimebook.com. If folks are interested in checking this out, you can go to onebiteatatimebook.com. It'll take you straight to this Kickstarter page. So what we're looking at right now is a piece of original artwork from a publication I illustrated called Carnival. And this is about electromechanical coin-operated amusement devices, or put simply, old pinball and arcade games. And this is a high resolution scan that's going to be reproduced in the book. So you can see the pencils that came before and the inks that came after and the double stroked lines and even the texture of the page. So it's really like holding a piece of original artwork in your hand, as close as you can get. But this is not simply going to be reproduced alone. When it's reproduced in the book, it's going to be paired with a final cleaned and colored image that was produced in the book originally, in Coin-Op Carnival originally. And then this original artwork is going to be laid over top of it on another page, but it will have a few die cut holes cut into it so that it reveals the final artwork behind it. So you can see either the before image, the original artwork, or the after image, the colored piece, or you can look at before and after at the same time with these holes cut into it. So you can see really how this piece came to be. And then as the page turns, that happens for another piece as well. So this is just one of the many specialty formatting options I'm including in this book that just goes to forward this theme of process that runs throughout.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And for people that are watching this on video, that's a real treat because it's sort of, I don't know how you could actually cram any more into a book. I mean, it seems like you've got everything in there, all the different textures and creativity that you've poured into this. And it's probably, it's this 20-year journey that you've mentioned, right? I mean, there's so much going into this. And I didn't know what you said there. I didn't realize that where you are a professor is actually the biggest collection in the world. Is that what you said? That's very interesting now.
That is a true fact. We have the largest public collection of comic books in the entire world. There are other comic book collections that will specialize in things like comic book art or animation, but in terms of comic books, we are the largest public collection in the world at Michigan State University.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And of course, what a milestone, 20 years and the book. When is the book out? What's the plan?
So it is currently running right now in November 2023, throughout the month of November 2023. If you go to onebiteatatimebook.com, it'll take you straight there. And at the end of the campaign, assuming we've reached our funding goal, then I'll produce these books and fulfill them. All the backers will get them first. And then I'd like to do sort of a 2024 celebration of the book being produced. But right now, really heavily focused on that Kickstarter campaign. And I hope that people head over there because this is going to be the best chance you have of getting this book, not only period, but also for the lowest price it's going to be offered. The physical book itself is going to retail for $59.95 US dollars. And for the Kickstarter campaign, I really wanted to thank the early adopters. So the book is going to be $50, so 17% off cover price, and that includes free shipping in the United States. So that's $50 out the door, in your hand, in your mailbox. If you are to purchase this book after the campaign, it will not be that price, I promise you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the thinking behind it, because it's obvious when you're talking about it. This is a real passion, right? This isn't something you just decided to do a few short weeks ago, right? This is a real
Right.
passion. So
Yeah.
for people listening or watching this episode, Ryan, not only are you interested in the whole comic world, whether it's the intricacies of the graphic novel work that you put out there. I know a lot of people follow what you do. Whether it's working in that space in an academic perspective, or whether it's as a book publisher working on something that sounds like it's going to be a very special project indeed. Where did all this come from? How did you end up here?
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have? So when I was young, I was a pretty reluctant reader. And it wasn't until I got my hands on some comic books that I really started digging in and enjoying reading. I'm a very visual person, and I think it really captivated both senses, visual and text, both at the same time. And it was interesting to see how they intermixed to me, and it just made sense in my brain a lot more than either one separately. So I read comics voraciously as a kid, and that kind of, long story short, continued on into adulthood to the point where I wanted to make my own comics. I interned at Marvel Comics in New York City in the early aughts, started making my own work, and I've been self-publishing my work for 20 years at this point. I really am a huge proponent of self-publishing. I love self-publishing, and it allows me to do anything I want to, as long as my audience will support it. Just for example, last year I put out a book called A Hunter's Tale, which was originally a poem that was written by my late grandfather over 40 years ago. This is a poem that's resonated with me for a very long time, as long as I can remember. And in difficult times, I'll sort of come back to it, and it kind of gives me solace. And I've always wanted to make it visual somehow. And over the course of the pandemic, I did that, launched it on Kickstarter, and it funded 5 figures for this little tiny poetry book that my grandfather wrote. Imagine pitching that to a publisher. Nobody's going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And if they did, I have such ridiculous requests like it must be this unpublishably tiny size and it's got to be printed on uncoated paper stock and it needs to look just so. So again, in an imaginary world, maybe a publisher takes it. They're never going to, but let's say they did. I would not see a dime from that publication. But go look at that Kickstarter page, 5-figure funding. So I think initially self-publishing can be a little bit daunting because you have to wear a few more hats than simply making your art. You've got to understand how to press the go button on the print machine, which is not that difficult. And that's pretty much what traditional publishers do. Outside of that, you would hope that traditional publishers promote your work. In an ideal world, that happens, but in a realistic world, they have their top tier talent, and that's who they're going to promote. They have a limited budget, that's understandable, and they cannot advertise everyone. So they'll ask, hey, what are your social media follower counts? Okay, we need you to leverage that when we produce this book. Well, if I'm going to be doing the promotion for the book anyway, then why would I not just promote it on my own? So for all these reasons and more, I am a huge proponent of self-publishing, and I'm so proud to have been doing that for a couple decades at this point, and now have this celebratory work in front of us. And my hope is that this isn't just a vanity project. This theme of process really runs true throughout the entire book, and I want it to be sort of an educational arm of Ryan Claytor. Like I'm a university professor as well. And so I think this book is really going to be exciting for not only artists beginning or established, but also just curious folks, people who are interested in seeing how people do what they do. I know that I love understanding that better. That's why I like listening to your podcast. You have such a cool, diverse selection of people on here. And I hope that people will see this and think, oh, that's interesting. First, this happens, then this happens. It doesn't just appear like magic.
Well, look, you're in the right place, Ryan, because we love creatives and we love leaders and thinkers, and you're definitely in the right space. And you kind of hinted there a little bit that, could you imagine a publisher taking on some of your work because you've got all these wild requests and you need it to be a particular way. But that's also the craftsmanship. It's the art, the craft, the passion, the attention to detail. And I know a lot of people, a lot of your fans and your supporters, they really love that about your work. You pour over it. You're meticulous about it. The level of quality that goes into it is it's incredible. So to bring out a book like this, I think it couldn't be any better of a time, and great to mark 20 years. I mean, you are truly that independent comic sort of art professional, and you've got everything going on in that space. And, self-publishing, it obviously fits with what you do. Some people are published by publishing houses. Some people love the self-publishing route. But I think with your specialism, with your exacting requirements, it has to be right. I mean, you will go out and publish something, even if you didn't make a dime from it, because it's right, it's perfect, it's exactly spot on. And I think that only comes from being a true guru in the space, a true
It's okay.
expert.
You can say control freak. It's okay.
No, I don't mean control freak, but
No, I'm just kidding with you.
that's the difference, isn't it, between somebody that just publishes something or puts, I'm not saying, publishing any book takes effort, but publishing the kind of book that you're coming out with, it takes extraordinary effort, is really the point I'm trying to make. So congratulations on everything, Ryan. It's great to see.
First of all, thank you very much, Simon. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I do really appreciate your kind words, and thank you for saying as much. I really do enjoy thinking about how the format of the book can contribute to the content of the book. And, we could talk about that till the cows come home. I'm not sure how interesting that is to your listeners, but I think it's pretty evident in this book right now, one bite at a time. And I feel so lucky to have found this particular printer that I'm working with. I don't know if any of your listeners are interested in self-publishing, but if you print your own work, I always suggest getting multiple printing quotes. And, not all printers are made the same, meaning not all printers specialize in the particular thing that you want. Maybe one printer specializes in saddle stitch binding, or, it's staple bound, or maybe another specializes in perfect binding, or that's glue binding, where it has a square edge on the back, or hardcovers, or what have you. So usually you ask around 3, 4, 5, half a dozen printers. I solicited quotes from over 24 printers for this project. So kind of overkill. But in making that list, I was able to call the top 2 or 3, request samples from those folks, get them back. And there was one particular printer who was head and shoulders above the rest, not only in terms of the accuracy of the samples that they sent me, but also with their communication and their excitement for this project, because I understand I am making unreasonable requests here. I want this book to be so fancy. And so every time I would shoot them an email or give them a call, I'd say, "Hey, I have this harebrained idea. Is it possible to do this in addition to everything else I've been asking you?" And they would always say, "Yes, and this is how much it will cost." So they never told me no, or that's too complicated, or I would suggest not. They said, "Yes, we can, and here's how much it'll cost," allowing me to make those decisions. So again, I was able to make this book everything I wanted it to be. And it's because of that multiple printing solicitation, those requests that I put out there, which may sound daunting to talk to over 24 printers, but essentially once you have your specifications, it's copying and pasting into another email, and that's pretty darn easy. So if folks in your audience are thinking about self-publishing, one, you do not have to contact 24 printers, but two, when and if you do, copying and pasting those specs into different emails is really easy. And then don't forget to make a spreadsheet at the end so that you can keep track of all that information. And that would be my suggestion for folks interested in doing something like this.
Well, look, what you call unreasonable requests, I think it's going to turn that book to be exquisite, and I'm really looking forward to it coming out.
Thank you,
And the
Simon.
fact that the printer is still answering your call, I think
Right.
that's a good sign. You've got a good printer there, Ryan.
I'm surprised every time they pick up.
Very good. Well, look, I want to ask you, I want to squeeze a couple of extra things in. The next 6 to 12 months, you're obviously busy with the Kickstarter campaign. You've got some plans for it in 2024, but how do you work, between your projects, between the academic side of what you do? Like, how does that all string together, and what's your roadmap look like? How do you go about planning the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, well, my head is heavy in this project right now, and once the campaign is over, I will be coordinating printing, allocation of funds, getting shipping materials so that I'm ready. Once everything comes, I can hurry and ship it out to everyone. So that's kind of where my head is currently for this project. I want to make fast fulfillment of this project. And then in terms of academia, this sort of dovetails oddly really well with what I'm teaching. I teach comics. I have fundamentals classes, I have advanced classes, and in my advanced comics class, I will take them on printing shop tours around town. We have a couple of really great printers in town. And so just last week, I took them on a print shop tour where we hit those couple different print shops and got to literally walk on top of these school bus size printers and get a better understanding of how these things work and how they might print their projects in the future. Um, Also, in my advanced class, they have the opportunity of having me coach them through a crowdfunding campaign. I've had students in the past who have garnered $1,000, over $2,500 for their first comic book. And if you told me that was possible 20 years ago when I started, I would have thought you were crazy. Like I was hand printing, hand folding, hand stapling, hand walking these books around to comic book retailers, hoping that they might take one on consignment, that I might get a dollar or two down the line if somebody purchases it. I have students making literally thousands of dollars on their first comic book, and I could not be more happy for them. So this whole self-publishing thing that seemed like it was just vanity publishing before is really coming into its own now, especially with the advent of crowdfunding and being able to harness your audience that you've amassed over a number of years. So uh, I have lots of good feelings about that. And to steer it back to your question, that's kind of how my two worlds are functioning and sort of dovetailing into one another at the same time.
I like that a lot, Ryan. Thanks for sharing. And look, the last thing I want to ask you today is there anything else that we haven't covered, or is there anything else that you want to double down on, that you want to share with our audience? And secondly, and importantly, if people want to reach out and connect with you, where do you want to point them to? Is it the Kickstarter? Is it a website? Is it LinkedIn? Where do you want to send people to?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity for being here and being so supportive, not only of me, but of everybody you bring on. The volume of interviews you do is astounding. So thank you for doing this. I don't know that you get a lot of recognition for that, but I've done podcasts and I understand how much work it is. So first of all, thank you, Simon. You asked about places to send people. One Bite at a Time book.com is where I'm sending everybody this month. So please head over there and check out the book. I just am so excited to share this with people after working on this book for literally 5 years at this point. And, 20 if you take all the artwork into consideration. But for the past 5 years, I've been diligently working on this book. As far as something to share with your audience, so for a really brief trip in the Wayback Machine, when I first started making comics 20 years ago, I felt some sort of way about self-publishing. To be more specific, it was a little bit of like it held a stigma. There was a little bit of a shame to it, like, oh, you have not been properly vetted. And I am continuously so fast forward to now, and I cannot thank my lucky stars more that I am still self-publishing to this day. I have complete control over my work. I make more money on my work than I could ever being published. Unless you are a Michael Jordan story, just top tier writer, you are not going to see much of a return from your work, if anything. So for all those reasons, I'm very thankful I'm self-publishing. But the thing I would like to impart to your listeners is that being vetted is overrated. And by that, I mean, you do not need the permission of a publisher. You do not need being granted, permission to come aboard. You don't need any of that. And I hope that nobody feels bad about not having that. Those feelings persist strongly to this day for many people. I know that self-publishing is coming leaps and bounds, but it still persists. I still get students, peers, creative folks who are striving for that publication deal. And I hesitate about how exactly to talk to them about it, because I understand that it is like a lifelong dream. I want to be published by so and so. I want to work with a particular character. And my gosh, you're going to have a more sustainable career if you can maintain control over it. I guess I'll leave it at that, because I feel like there's a far greater soapbox that I could continue on.
Yeah.
But with that said, I really just want people to feel okay about not being vetted by traditional publishing.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you make. And, some people go down that route, but very few end up being hugely successful in that route. There's the financial aspects of it too. But thank goodness that we live in interesting times where there are tools and platforms and online help and forums and people like you that are blazing a trail to show people how to do it. And I think that's a really good note for us to end this show on. So we encourage everybody, obviously, to head over to your website, to check it all out, to find out what's going on, to get involved, of course, with this wonderful project. And also to thank people who've been watching or listening to this episode around the world. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help support this show. And hopefully you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers, just like Ryan Claytor. So thank you, Ryan. It's been great to catch up with you today again.
Simon, thanks again. Really appreciate it.